Thank you. A bit of a change, really, with this presentation. I want to talk about a top-down approach to how we consider those futures. And this approach and this thinking has really come out of work that we've been doing on major infrastructure projects, so looking at assets that have got a very long asset life, long lead times, but also looking at work we've been doing in the east of England and other places on longer-term strategies, and just thinking about what the trajectory of change is going to be in the future. So just to start, here's a really useful quote from the Strategic Transport Plan. And I've highlighted in red the important words here, that thinking to the future, it's about impacts of social, technological, economic, political, and environmental change. And what we're looking for is a transport system that's user-centric, smart, autonomous, integrated, and importantly, resilient and sustainable. And given the uncertainties and changing needs of the economy, policy measures and transport interventions must be flexible. So how are we going to be agile in the future, given these changes and given all the things that those column inches that you can read any day in the papers about digital and autonomy, etc., how do we consider that? Here's an interesting quote from The Economist of last year. An epic struggle looms, which is a bit dramatic. It will transform daily life as profoundly as cars did in the 20th century, reinventing transport and reshaping cities. So what we've heard about this morning is an aspiration looking out to 2050, but that's against a background of this change that's starting to happen out there. We don't know when changes are going to happen, but that change is happening. So what we've been doing is thinking really top down. What's the global trends and challenges that will affect transport, will affect society, will affect the economy? Demographic changes, growing, aging population, health, well-being and loneliness, net migration, urbanization, social changes, rise of a sharing economy, customer expectations, customer centricity. So how can transport be as good as retail in terms of that customer experience? Environmental focus, climate change, scarcity of resources, which is really important, and the role of renewables. On the economic side, the gig economy, people doing multiple jobs in multiple ways, and development of new business models, doing new ways of doing business, new ways of people engaging, and obviously the political landscape and the changes that are ongoing. Just looking at transport, digital is everywhere. If you think back, if we're sat in this room 20 years ago, the internet was only just starting to take foot. If you think about how ubiquitous that is now, it affects every single part of our life. There are people in this room live tweeting. That would have been conceived impossible 20 years ago. And that connectivity of people, assets, vehicles, and systems will pervade every part of the transport realm. And that leads to how we use data and artificial intelligence, the whole role of autonomous vehicles, automation, but also robotics in terms of operations and maintenance, taking humans out of dangerous environments so we can deliver better, more efficient systems in a better way. Obviously, decarbonisation of energy. And lastly, the whole sharing piece, how public transport, how private transport may morph due to the sharing of assets. That's the sharing of vehicles and sharing of other assets between us. But what's important, all of this is about accessing opportunity and need. And if you think about those opportunities and needs, and some of that's been touched on this morning, it's about maintaining those social interactions so people can come together to learn and share and challenge. It's about those employment opportunities, educational attainment, healthcare, particularly in an aging population, leisure tourism, goods and services, and products, crops, raw materials. All those together are all fundamental economic activities that future transport will serve. And technology has a role to play in that, but it's important that we consider what that role is. We need to achieve meaningful future outcomes. So whether it's autonomous vehicles, whether it's connected vehicles, whether it's the role of digital, it's not about technology as a thing in itself. It's about technology serving transport to deliver the outcomes that we've heard about this morning. And some of those important ones are up here. That customer-centric experience, seamless access and connectivity. Importantly, balancing choice, demand and supply, so the behavioural part of this, how we can nudge people to make choices that serve their needs at different times, how we can improve efficiency, reduce congestion and pollution, maximise capacity, reliability, etc. safety and security, and the list goes on. And it also includes health and well-being of all of those customers and all of those users at whatever part of their life they're in. So new technology has a particular role to play in serving those that might have been underserved by our transport system so far, particularly in the future. Aging populations being able to remain economically active for longer, reducing the impacts of loneliness, the young having alternatives to travel. And that applies to everything. It applies to social care transport, education transport, right across the piece. So it's important that we think about the whole. So how can we be agile and future ready? And there's some questions here which are really fundamental. Why do we need to think about change? Because we could just carry on doing what we're doing. Well, the facts are that those people out in Silicon Valley, out in Nevada, elsewhere, they're all developing the new technologies. Those new technologies are happening. We've got pilots already in the UK. We've got major pilots on autonomy and other propositions already starting this year. But what might change and when realistically? My advice, my challenge to everybody is read. Read, and read some more, because there's countless column inches on all this stuff that promises that everything will change tomorrow. It won't, but there is a trajectory of change today that we need to anticipate. And what do we really need to be worried about in our different sectors that we all work in? What are the things that are going to impact us, and how can we anticipate that? And how applicable is this stuff really? And what are the risks? What are the risks to our existing operations, our existing business decisions, our investment decisions, and how we plan? And importantly, how can we improve our services and networks? And that leads to the impacts on the things we heard about this morning, how we do our investment programs, business cases. Importantly, what might it mean for our revenue requirements? We may be able to do a lot of our services more efficiently. And what might the operational regimes that serve those customers be? So there's a lot of questions and a lot to think about. So my challenge would be, how do we anticipate that future, and how can we all be agile to it? Thank you.